Hello YouTube. So I'm going to do a three-part video. The first part is going to be my general likes and dislikes about the Drill Doctor 750, which I have had for 2 days now. The second video is going to be features of the unit, and the third video is going to be tips and tricks, how to set up, how to cut a bit. Doing it my way. So anyway, let's talk about the things I don't like. I have read the entire manual, I've watched a bunch of videos, and I specifically bought the 750X because I wanted to be able to adjust the angle of attack on the cutting edge, and I also wanted to be able to do 118 degree and 135 degree bits. So I bought the 750 because it can do all those things. But what I have found out, and this is my first gripe, is that when you are cutting, so this right here is a 135 degree bit, and this is a 118 degree bit. Essentially what it is the angle from here to here for the black bit, that's 118, from here to here, that's 135 degrees. So essentially what happens with the smaller angle on the 135 degree bit is they tend to wander more. So you want to have a cross cut or spur bit or spur cut bit. So this is a really small point, about the diameter of a hair, on a low angle bit like 135 degrees. But for 118 degree bits, the point is so pointy that you get much less wander from the bit, so you don't need to spur point them so much. In fact, even this bit here, which has got almost 3/32 of a width right here in the very point, doesn't really wander very much, despite it having so much width in there, just because of the angle attack on the cutting edges. Alright, so this is my first gripe. So anyway, oops, put that bit over here. So this bit comes out of a kit all SAE with 135 degrees on them, and they all have spur cut all the way down to about 1/8 of an inch. So let me snag another one of these bits. Here we go. So this is a bit that I had shattered the point on and then regrounded on here. So being that the bit was already 135 degrees, I set this machine up to 135 degrees and cut it. So as you can see on those two bits, they're both cut at the same angle. Alright, so I also wanted to do the spur point on here. So there is a port over here that you put the bit in, and then it cuts the spur on it. So this right here goes all the way down to a point that's the size of a hair. I mean, it's a really small point. But on this bit right here, hopefully that'll show up on the video, the point on here is about 1/16 of an inch wide. In other words, it did not get down to that spur point at all, not even close. In fact, when I compare it to another bit, oh, that's a little too big. Let's go one that's about the same size. There we go. So this is a metric bit. So here I've got a bit that I did not cut spur point on at all, and that flat point across there and there is actually the same size. And here they are, two bits that are nearly identical in diameter. One of them cut with a spur point, one not. Alright, so that's my first complaint, is it doesn't do a spur point. And in fact, it didn't do anything even close to one. The other thing is this edge right here on the flute, on the back side, and on the other side, they may or may not grind the same. On the few bits that I have done that have spur points, or that were supposed to have spur points, I have ground these things multiple times to finally get this grind on here to be the same as that one over there. Because more often than not, it will grind one side a lot and the other side a little, and then you have an off-center bit, and then it wanders a lot, and you can't make an accurate hole. So the spur point cutter on here is absolutely, utterly worthless. It did not make a spur point, and it doesn't even cut evenly on both sides. Total crap. Not worth the trouble having. I will not do any more spur points. And if you're doing 135 degree bits, you really need to have a spur point, because otherwise the bits wander so much. So that means that the 135 degree setting on here will never get used either. So virtually useless functionality. The spur point was the whole reason why that 135 degrees is out of the picture. Alright, so that's my biggest complaint right there. You can't do a spur point, which means you can't do 135 degrees. The second one is not quite so bad. This knob, there we go, I didn't crank it down so much. This knob, you can snug it up just a little tiny bit, and then it's a royal pain in the neck to get undone. So if you do tighten it up, expect to really have to fight the thing to get it undone. All right, so here's the other gripe. So I've got this thing just barely tightened. The knob needs a washer behind here so that there's not direct mechanical contact between the knob and this rotating portion. But because there is, let's see if I can get it to do it. Nope, didn't do it that time. Try that again. Nope, still not doing it. All right, so essentially what will happen is you'll tighten the knob and this whole entire mechanism will slump because you're putting rotational force against this metal piece and it just causes this to move. Anyway, when you set this thing in the right position, hold it firmly with your hand, lock the knob, and then you don't get that movement. Minor details, all I needed was a washer to fix that problem. Okay, so that's the two biggest complaints I have about the thing, but there's one more. And I will get into this in greater detail when I do setup. Anyway, there's these two jaws right in here. And when you put a bit in, if you don't get it dead lined up exactly in the flutes in those jaws, and then you go to grind, you will probably grind the cutting edge off your bit because you'll be cutting here rather than back here. And that basically means that you can't use your bit. You might as well regrind it. So I will get to that into greater detail when I actually go through and do an actual grind. But if you don't get it just dead straight, it doesn't do a good grind, and the bit is probably useless, and you'll have to regrind it. So that's pretty much my complaints about the thing. So here's the things I like about it. It's cheap. I paid $140 for this thing. I got it on Amazon. My very first bit. Now, it didn't cut particularly well because it didn't have all the little details worked out, which I'll go into later. But my very first bit was a destroyed, shattered bit, and I ground it back to a nice sharp point. So I can say that it's fairly easy to use as long as you don't mind its quirky details. So that's pretty much it. Those are two things I like about it. Fairly easy to use, and it was cheap. Otherwise, it's not very good. Oh, and that brings me to one other thing. The grinding wheel inside here. Supposedly it's 180 grit, but let me grab a bit here. The ground surface on here is really rough. It's not a very finished bit. So here's a factory bit. I scrape my fingernail on it. My fingernail just feels like it's smooth. I do the same thing on here, and it's really rough. And if you look at these things like under a 30X loop, this has little tiny machine marks in it, and this doesn't look quite as bad as, like, say, the pockmarked surface of the moon, but it sure looks pretty rough. Anyway, I have bought a 220 grit wheel for this drill doctor, and I'm going to give that a try and see if it makes a better cut. But the grinds on here are really, really rough. So that's pretty much it. The crosscut doesn't work so good. The grinding wheel is too coarse. This is kind of buggy, and this thing shifts when you tighten the knob. Not a great machine. It's cheap. What do you want?